Hello friends, I am Nisha Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of English. The topic that we are going to discuss today is a stanza-wise analysis of Andrew Marvell's poem, To His Coy Mistress. To His Coy Mistress is one of the most famous poems of the 17th century and probably the most famous poem Andrew Marvell ever wrote. It's a classic seduction poem which sees Marvel endeavoring to persuade his would-be lover or mistress to go to bed with him. As well as being a seduction lyric, To His Coy Mistress is also a carpe diem poem which argues that we should seize the day because life is short. Means we should make the maximum use of the time within a limited period because life is very short. Now, stanza 1. In the first two lines of To His Coy Mistress, the poem establishes its form and its central concern. The speaker addresses someone directly, whom he calls lady. This introduces one of the poem's key devices, apostrophe. The rest of the poem will be an apostrophe address to the lady. His tone is familiar, teasing, and also a bit stern. Though the speaker seems to know the lady well, he nonetheless disapproves of her choices and wants to convince her to change to live differently. The lady that the speaker addresses, the same woman mentioned in the title, his coy mistress. The word mistress means something different now than it did in Marvel's time. Though contemporary speakers use the word to describe a woman who has an affair with a married man, Marvel uses the word in a much more general sense. It simply describes a woman who holds authority of some kind, such as a female head of household. The reader may wonder what authority the mistress of Marvel's poem holds. It's a tricky question to answer because the poem doesn't tell its readers much about her. In fact, at most the reader knows that she is coy, she is flirtatious, but she has refused the speaker's advances. The speaker begins the poem by reproaching her for doing so. He emphasizes, though, that her reticence and delay is not a crime in and of itself. If the two had whirled enough in time, it would be perfectly acceptable. In other words, if both the speaker and the mistress were immortal, then the mistress could flirt and delay as long as she wanted to. But the speaker implies since they are not immortal, since they can and will die perhaps soon, it is a crime to delay to flirt as the mistress has seemingly done in the past. The first line introduces a thought which the second line completes. This establishes a pattern for the poem. The speaker's thoughts often fall into two-line rhyming units or couplets. The opening lines of the poem also establish the poem's logical structure, which is a syllogism, introducing its major premise. If we had all the time in the world to love each other, you could be as coy as you want. Had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness lady were no kind. The speaker starts off by telling the mistress that if there was enough time and space, whirled enough in time, then her coyness wouldn't be a criminal act. This is a roundabout way of calling her a criminal and makes us think of jails, courtrooms, and punishment. Hmm. What exactly her crime? What is she being coy about? We would sit and think which way to walk and pass our long love stay. In any case, he continues, if they had all the time and space they wanted, they could Google everything read guidebooks, and carefully consider where they might go next while aimlessly strolling and resting whenever they pleased. Down by the Indian Ganges side, she could hang out on the bank of the Indian Ganges finding rubies. The Ganges River is considered sacred and holy by many people all over the world. Thou by the Indian Ganges side shouldst rubies find, I by the tide. And he would be across the world at the Amber. Actually, he says complain, which also means love song. This would place them far away from each other, obviously. The speaker doesn't sound thrilled at the idea of a long distance relationship. Of Umber would complain, I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. He would go back in time to Noah and the flood, and forward in time to the conversion of the Jews, all the while loving her. The speaker's grand biblical language mocks poems which describe love in divine terms. My vegetable love should grow vaster than empires and moors. Now we get one of the poem's most famous line. The speaker starts telling the mistress about his vegetable love. Much debate occurs over the meaning of this term. And 100 years should go to praise thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze. 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest, an age at least to every part. Anyhow, he says that if he had time, he would give her compliments about each of her individual body parts, and he would spend a bazillion years doing it. And the last day should show your heart, and then finally, after all complimenting, she would show her heart, presumably by having sex with him. For lady, you deserve this estate, nor would I love at lower rate. You are worth it too, he says, and I wouldn't give you anything less than the first class love. The argument begins with an appeal to the coin mistress based on the idea that if time and space were limitless, they could spend their days in leisure. She by the exotic Ganges River, for instance, he by the ebb and flow of the Amber. Sex needn't be a priority in this fantasy world. The speaker's ironic tone even allows for his love of the lady a decade before the Old Testament flood, and she could say no to his advances up to the time when the Jews could convert to Christianity, which would never ever happen, of course. Years he would spend growing his love like a vegetable grows slowly, rooted and strong in the earth. And he could bide his time admiring her physical beauty, her eyes, forehead, breast, and other parts. Lines 21 to 32. But all of the previous means nothing because the reality is that the clock is ticking louder and louder. Time is flying. And then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. Don't look over your shoulder. Don't look ahead either because there is a vast desert eternity. The speaker's tone starts to alter, becoming more serious. The future isn't that bright. Her beauty will be lost in the sense of time. Even worse, when she is dead and buried, only the worms will experience what he presently longs for. What a challenging image! He too will perish, consumed by his own passion. Nothing but a pile of ash. The last couplet of this section is perhaps the most quoted and puts a seal on the message. Let's make love while we are still alive. But such a plan is fantasy because in reality, time is short. This brings us to the second section of Marvel's poem. What lies before Marvel and his mistress is not a full and rich succession of days upon days of lived existence, but instead long deserts of eternity, the eternity of death, rather than an eternal life of praise and courtship. In this future, which will be upon them both all too quickly, the woman's honor and virginity mean nothing and have turned to dust, while Marvel's desire for her, like his body, be ashes. After all, people can't make love in the grave, and we'll be in our graves soon enough. Lines 33 to 46. The final part of this poem concentrates on the rational summing up of what has gone before. Note the first two words. Now, therefore, it's as if the speaker is saying, look, I've given you two quite valid reasons for you to succumb. Consequently, this final effort will make you sense. And the speaker has clearly thrown out the fantasies and wishes of the previous scenes. Gone are space and time and death. In their place is the all consuming present. Just look at the use of the word now, suggesting that the speaker cannot wait a second longer for his postponed fulfillment. The emphasis is on the physical, skin, sport, roll and tear, the language being tinged with aggression and forceful energy. As the lines progress, the intensity increases, the passion starts to burn, and when the images of the two birds of prey emerge, devouring time instead of the other way round, the reader is surely taken beyond mere pleasures of the flesh. The iron gates could well be the barrier, the threshold through which the speaker wishes to emerge. He sets the imperative. If they come together, then who knows what will happen? Common sense and the logic of time will no longer dictate their lives. In the third and final section of this poem, Marvel says that in light of what he has just said, the only sensible thing to do is to enjoy themselves and go to bed together while they still can. They should, like birds of prey, devour their time at once rather than languidly letting their lives slip by unused. Marvel ends his poem by exhorting his mistress to join him in rushing headlong at the gates, barring them from full enjoyment of life, using his strength and her sweetness to create a ball, like a cannonball, which can be used to bombard and destroy the iron gates of life. We cannot make time stand still for us, Marvel concludes, but we will make time fly by enjoying ourselves and making the most of life. Now, there are a few words which may needs explanation. Coyness. Coyness is evasiveness, hesitancy, modesty, coquetry, reluctance, playing hard to get. Which book? Example of enzyment, carrying the sense of one line of verse over the next line without a pause. Ganges river in Asia, originating in the Himalayas and flowing southeast through India to the Bay of Bengal. The young man here suggests that the young lady could postpone her commitment to him if her youth lasted a long, long time. She could take real or imagined journeys abroad, even to India. She could also refuse to commit herself to him until all the Jews convert to Christianity. But since youth is fleeting, as the poem later points out, there is no time for such journey. She must submit herself to him now. Rubies. Ruby is a gem. Gems that may be rose red or purplish red. In folklore, it is said that rubies protect and maintain virginity. Ruby deposits occur in various parts of the world, but the most precious ones are found in Asia, including Myanmar, India, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, and Russia. Ambar is a river in northeastern England. It flows through Hull, Andrew Marvel's hometown. Flood. Resorting to hyperbole, the young man says that his love for the young lady is unbounded by time. He would love her 10 years before great flood that no outlasted in his ark, and would still love her until all Jews became Christian at the end of the world. Vegetable love, love that cultivated and nurtured like a vegetable so that it flourishes prolifically. This state, this lofty position, this dignity. Time's winged chariot. In Greek mythology, the sun was personified as the god Apollo, who rode his golden chariot from east to west each day. Thus, Marvel here associates the sun god with the passage of time. Marble vault is the young lady's tomb. Worms, a morbid phallic reference. Quaint, preserved carefully or skillfully. Dew, the 1681 manuscript of the poem uses glue, not dew, apparently as coin past tense for glue. Transpires, erupts, breaks out, emits, gives off. Slow chapped is chewing or eating slowly. Thorough is through. So, thank you.